So first I have to start with a question in the room. Would you please raise your hand if you're a lover of dogs, cats, fish, pets of any kind? Or if you live with someone who loves dogs, but keep them up, dogs, pet, keep them up, fish, anything. Or if you just have your hand down because you're hoping I won't look at you, but I am. Now we have a community. Because the community is the early adopters, right, to those, those people at the end who come dragging and say, okay, all right, I'll do that. That's what a community is, and that's all the communities that we deal with. So for this community, this dog, fish, pet loving community, I have a story. And the story goes like this. I was just standing up on the plane, getting ready for my connecting flight from Baltimore to Albany, when my phone went off. It was my neighbor Chantel, with the worst news we'd never want to hear. Your dogs are gone, they're missing, and no one has seen them. Now, there's 2 inches of snow on the ground and a cold rain falling at home. As I got off the plane, and my flight was, for the next 2 hours, delayed, canceled, and rescheduled, I frantically texted and phoned, asking everybody to get on social media and spread the word. The next couple of days is just a blur of strain and jet lag and no, you know how you wouldn't sleep with that. No one anywhere had seen my 2 white standard poodles. Northville, New York, is in the beautiful Adirondacks, and it backs up to hundreds of acres of forest. And there's bears and mountain lions and traps and active hunters. So no amount of microchipping or little fancy collars was going to help solve this at all. But the power of community in a small village made all the difference. By the time I got home, jumped in the truck of my board member, and we went off-roading till midnight. I passed parents and their children, guys from the fire department, the guys plowing the streets, and they all knew and were looking for my 2 lost dogs. There was 1 sighting of them in a day and a half. Late on the afternoon of the 2nd day, someone somewhere posted on social media that their boyfriend's dad's deer cam half a mile up the mountain early that morning had spotted 2 white, wet dogs. My neighbor John, Chantel's husband, was determined to find them. So at dawn the next morning, he took off with his 2 teenage children and their dog. They tracked those dogs and their prints for 3.5 hours, and they found them 5 miles away up the mountains. Tired, footsore, hungry, confused, they came home and they slept for a week. And from that day in November to just today, I can't go anywhere without somebody asking me, so how are your dogs? So that's the idea of community, and it has 2 lessons for us to think about. And the first is when we set a goal that we all want to work on, we've got to have meaning and purpose in that built-in relationship, because that's how we develop accountability. If we don't have that relationship piece clear in what we're doing, we're not building sustainable, long-lasting change, because that only exists between us. And the second one is easy. Why? Well, for this community, that's easy. It's the dogs, right? It's all about the pets. But for all of us, it's about what we can do to help each other. And in our communities, our boards, our colleges, our school districts, our communities, sitting right next to us are our loudest opponents. And we owe it to them to give them a clear and consistent message so that we can take those next steps together. So tonight, my example I'm proud to give you is Northville. Northville's a beautiful town in the Adirondacks in New York. And you know it. You come. You grab the ice cream, right? You walk down the street, you go to the concert in the park, go in the art gallery, get out in that lake and swim and boat and fish and have a great time. Well, when you're all gone, there's only about 1,000 or so people there. And oddly enough, even in that beautiful place, half of those kids and their families live in poverty. And as you heard, it's deep poverty. So that's a problem for us leaders to consider. Another consideration as we come to the table, because the reimbursement resources for those children is not equal. So what do we do? Well, let's start with taking a lens and looking at the village. In terms of the village, they do what they need to do. They step up. They have an economic development plan, a comprehensive plan. That's the nuts and bolts that helps us connect to resources, to grants. Businesses can take advantage of that. But more important, this little village has taken a lesson. We have a community collaboration council. It's composed of all the bigwigs in the village, the mayor, the district superintendent, Rotary, the Art Network, our senior citizens, the business merchants are all there. And it's a great place to coordinate, collaborate, our activities, our weekends, our parades, make sure we support each other, we don't step on each other. But even more than that, it's the only place where we all come together and think of the village as a whole. And that way, when we put on that lens, we can plan for the best of all the citizens. So see how that works as we're talking. When we get to the kind of building, sort of nuts and bolts stuff, we also have put that lens on. So recently, the school district is completing a capital project. And we decided to put that lens on the project, and we see the school district as the heart of the community. So the playground we built outside is 4 times the size of the previous one. And around the playground and the fields, the new fields, is a walking path. It's beautiful. It's for all the community to use. And there's an exercise station right next to the road, so you can hop on. In addition, we also planted a new performance area, an amphitheater, because the school and the village both love the performing arts and literature. So now we have a new venue for that. Again, the village has made another decision, and this is the one I want you to listen to at this table particularly. The village has made the decision to consciously involve youth in its redevelopment. Now that's important. Adirondack villages, like lots of our cities and towns, are declining in population. And the mean age is rising. So we really need those high school graduates to go out, get that education, and come back and be that next wave of change and excitement in this beautiful place. So here's a couple of examples. Last year, our 4th grade students, hearing that a vacant lot was going to be redeveloped, asked the village board if they could take a look at it. They did a survey of the village and the district. Out of that, they built priorities, and they built a plan, a blueprint for a community park that they presented to the village board. The board loved it. And they took all of those ideas and planned to use them in those economic development plans. This year, the 2nd graders, who are working on our next gen standards for social studies, what is in your community, who are you as a community member, decided to turn that around and ask a question. What does our community need to grow? And they invited the mayor in to discuss this with them. Out of that discussion came 2 great ideas. One was, well, we need a hotel. That's already in the economic development plan. But the second one, no adult had mentioned. They said, we need a fitness center. That's brilliant, because now they can come back and brag that their 2nd grade class helped to build that, because all those priorities are on that list now. So we think of ways also to work together, to dream, to try to come to some plans that are harder to make happen, but we're going to keep kicking them down the road and keep working on them. In the school district, we're working on project-based learning. And that means we're taking the things that kids need to learn and understand and applying them to real-world situations. And we're asking them to work in teams and with resources outside of the district, so push the walls out. Well, if we want the kids to work in teams, we don't just want them to do that during the school day, we want it outside of school time. But not all our kids have Wi-Fi at home. So in those conversations together, we mentioned this to the village and said, we think this is a priority. We'd like to see free Wi-Fi in the footprint of the village for our kids. That's our dream. And the village said, you know, that's a good idea, and we could use some of that too. So, what the heck? We've approached Cisco. Cisco has big things going. They have smart cities initiatives. You know, those big cities with lots of resources to hook up to. And we've asked them to consider a smart village initiative. Much harder, there's much less there to hook up to, you've got to really string things together to be a little MacGyver, and yet we think it's an equity issue for generational rural poverty. and they must come to that decision. So we're still working on that. Feel free to call them if you'd like. That would be great. So that's another way that we're working together. On the school district side, we've really embraced the idea of we need to think about who we are as leaders. And that's a long-term thing. So we started with getting all the stakeholders in the room for different meetings, lots of successive meetings. Who are we? Sure, we're a comprehensive school, but why? Why are we graduating kids? What are we doing with them? After all the discussion in a long time, it really boiled down to two ideas. That our graduates are engaged critical thinkers, and they're also decision makers. So that accomplished decision makers, sorry. Those two things we think can measure everything we need. Sad to say, 7 years ago, we were identified by the state as a focus district in school for our low test scores in middle school. Our graduation rate at that time, about 75, 76%. Not unusual for the region, not where we envisioned we wanted to be. So we started learning from national strategic planners who told us to take small steps in leadership and put them together so that you build a critical mass over time and you begin to change the way you think of what can happen. And doing that, I can say proudly that this year we are no longer identified as a focus district or school, and that our graduation rate the last few years has been over 90%. And that's due to the leadership of my wonderful teachers and my young administrators. And this is how they did it. We started working together and we began to create roles and let them fill them and define them. So we have teacher leaders, teacher collaborators. We have teachers and committees who make decisions with and for other teachers on assessments and curriculum. We also have teacher coaches. We have a teacher coach who's helped us to understand how we need to upgrade our STEM work, the science and technology, in our instruction. We have teacher leaders who have helped us to understand our personal strengths and what we contribute to each other as a team and how we can keep improving that and make us all better and more productive, adults and kids together. But it's not just limited to the adults. We've asked leadership of the children. Most comprehensive schools have a graduation requirement for community service. It's about 10 hours. We said that didn't match our model. That's not who we want our kids to be. We asked them to contribute 40 hours. So now when you come to the village and there's an event or a fundraiser or a parade, you'll see our kids. They're busy, purposely. I mentioned that we have project-based learning going. The capstone for that is we will actually be launching it next year, our Advanced Fabrication Technology Pathway. And we have partners in the room. Our partners are here, the community college, the chamber, our business partners in the area. And the wonderful thing about that is not only do we get to think about that critical thinking and the decision making, and we've got really cool things like CNC machines and all the things for our fab lab, 3D printers, plasma, vinyl cutters, everything, kids love that stuff. But they are working in a design theory model for customers. So they're already learning it's not about pleasing yourself. It's about being in relationship with your businesses and producing the products that they need and filling that need. So that's another way to say that we're doing that same thing. The other way that we're looking at things is developing leadership. I mentioned the fourth graders and the second graders. We have kids working on project-based learning everywhere through the grades. So I could mention several, but a couple would be if you walked in the hallways of the 3rd through 5th grade, you'd have to dodge the drafts right now because the 3rd graders are drafting out a sensory path for all the kids to leave from the playground and then come back into the classroom ready to learn. Our 10th through 12th graders are working on an underwater ROV project. Just a couple of ideas, things that aren't here, things that are breaking them out of their normal pattern. And no good story goes without a wild card. So the wild card in this instance is the tooth fairy. If you walk down the hallways of an elementary school, it's very common to see writing samples on either side of the wall. And that's a way that other kids can enjoy what each other's learning, parents and community members can appreciate the skills that are being taught. And a parent was walking down the hall and she happened to spot a 3rd grader had written a letter to the tooth fairy. Very important event, lost a special tooth, but had a little different request. The request was, do you think we could have just a little more food at home? Well, that's all it took for that parent to be galvanized into a leadership moment. She went back to her church, which is affiliated with the food bank, and I'm very proud to tell you that as of this month, we're sending home backpacks of food to identified children at home. And that child, his response was, wow, I don't know what I keep doing, but every week I'm winning a backpack of food. Another leader in the making, his own strength coming true. So where does that leave us? In Northville, you know, we're learning, we're growing, we're trying things. Certainly everything doesn't work. But for the community we made in here, the community we formed by raising our hand, the question is for you. Is this something that would work for you? Is it scalable to your effort? Is it something that you could reproduce and get a return on investment that would be worth it for your partners? We think so. ADK magazine, in its December issue, called Northville a Renaissance Village. And we have business leaders who are stepping up. The owners of the 5 and 10 now have taken on a Main Street redevelopment grant, and they're transforming a whole block of the downtown. That's a big leap. We think so together. And we think that's the only way really you can make change grow and stick. And that feeling, community, you felt it when I first started with that story, right? It was that Monday morning when my phone buzzed, and there was a picture and 3 words. We found them. And there, wet, cold, and hungry, being fed by my teenage neighbor Ian, sprawled on the snow, handing out Cheetos, was my 2 dogs, Jazz and Bixby. We did that together, and that's how you'll do it. Thank you.